Today we're talking my early top 12 quarterback rankings for 2020, coming right up. Welcome to the Gridiron Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for listening today. Today is June 1st, 2020. My name is Chip and I'm your host. If you're a new listener, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on Stitcher. You can also watch us on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And I hope everyone's doing well today. Hope everyone had a good weekend. I live in Washington State, so finally this weekend, yesterday, things were kind of back to normal in the sense that there's no more stay-home order. We're finally progressing in the different phases of open up the economy and everything. So it's pretty good. I was able to finally go to the barber and get a haircut and just kind of feel like there's some normalcy, be able to go out and at least get a haircut. At least that's something that's beneficial. But it was good. I was able to spend time with family. My birthday is actually today. So my nephew and my dad actually flew from Florida to Seattle to come surprise me. And it was very interesting because I don't know if anybody has seen the episode of Friends where all of them are hanging out in the apartment and a knock comes on the door. You hear a knock on the door and everyone kind of looks around like, well, we're all here. Who can that be? It was the same kind of concept. I was sitting in my living room doing some editing and I hear a knock on the door. I did the same thing. I look around. I was like, everyone's accounted for. Who the heck is that? And I look out my peephole and I see that my dad is standing in front of the door. And you ever had that moment where you're trying to register what you're seeing, but it's just not clicking for you? And it was just an interesting moment. It was a good moment because I haven't seen them in a while. So for them to come and surprise me, it was a pretty cool experience, and just be able to spend time with them and just be able to, spend your birthday with your family. It's hard when my family lives on the West Coast and they live on the East Coast, and it was good. So it's been a very good weekend, and it's nice to be able to kind of feel some of that normalcy in life with all the things that are going on. But hope everyone else is doing well. Today I'm talking about my top 12 quarterbacks for 2020. And now these are early rankings. These will change, if things happen throughout the off season. But I just wanted to make sure that I get these rankings out there to kind of see, so you guys can see kind of where I'm leaning towards certain players. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. To start off, I have Carson Wentz as my number 12 quarterback. Now last year he ended the season at QB 10. Last year the Eagles were 14th in total offense. They were 11th in passing offense. Carson Wentz was top 5 in passing touchdowns, but we all seen that the injuries really hindered his production. He had no receiver catch for more than 400 yards on the season. But I do think he has bounce back potential. You have Jackson returning, you have Jeffrey returning, you have the addition of Marquise Goodwin, you have the rookie receiver Jalen Reagor. You do have as well Zach Ertz and the emerging Dallas Goedert. You can't forget that there's Miles Sanders as well. He's a pass catching running back. So I think everything is lining up for Carson Wentz to have a really good season. I can see him being a top 5 quarterback. There's the potential there. There's enough weapons there that he didn't have last year that allow him to get to that top 5 position. What we thought he was last year, I think he will happen to be this year. I had him as a top 5 quarterback last year, as well, but in the beginning of the season. But I think with the weapons that he gained in the draft, in free agency and all that, and people returning from injury, you can see a really, really good season from Carson Wentz. I have Tom Brady at number 11. Now, last year he ended the season at quarterback 12. Now, we all can agree that he had a down season based on the lack of talent around him. He had Antonio Brown get released, Gronkowski was retired, you had Josh Gordon get traded to the Seattle Seahawks. So he didn't really have a lot to work with. And I think going down to Tampa, he's going to be able to join a offense that was first in overall in passing offense. They were third overall in total offense. And when you go from a team with lack of talent in the sense of the receivers to Tampa when you got Godwin, you got Evans, you got Gronkowski, you got Howard, you got Brait. I mean, I cannot imagine Brady not being a QB1 this year and maybe getting closer to being an elite quarterback this year because of the fact that he's in such a high power offense. Now, people want to talk about he lost some arm strength and all that stuff, and I was looking at some of the stats, and from what I've seen, based on the Winston and Brady comparisons, with throws of 20 yards or more, they both ranked first and completed 41% of their passes. I don't think when people are talking about Brady, it's not the arm that they're worried about, it's the mobility part of it. So I do think that Brady is going to be a solid QB1 this year, and he does have top 5 potential. I mean, we've seen Brady as an elite fantasy quarterback, but when you go from a team that didn't have the talent around him other than Edelman to the most talent he's ever had, you're going to see him bounce back this year. So Tom Brady, by far, at QB 11 is exactly the right spot for draft purposes, with the potential to be able to go up into the top 5. Now, QB 10, I have Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers ended the season at QB 9. And for me, I think he had a down season. I think, obviously, it's known that it's not the Aaron Rodgers that we're used to. We're not accustomed to Aaron Rodgers as kind of being that lower tier QB1. Last year their offense was pretty average. I mean, they were 19th in total offense. They were 17th in passing offense. He was tied with 8th with passing touchdowns. But I believe it was the first year we kind of seen Aaron Rodgers decline. Rodgers had trouble against top passing defenses. He only scored more than 20 fantasy points 4 times. There was 3 games with less than 10 fantasy points. I'm a little concerned for him this year due to the Packers' offense and whatnot, because their offense was lower. It was the lower half of the league last year, and they really also didn't help him out in the draft. I mean, we all knew that he needed offensive weapons. We all knew that Aaron Rodgers needs somebody to help Davante Adams. I mean, Davante Adams is a stud receiver, but he doesn't have anything much after that. And for them to kind of neglect it in the draft was kind of mind-boggling to me. It was probably one of the worst drafts I've ever seen from the Packers, because they didn't really draft for need. They kind of draft for future. I mean, you drafted Jordan Love in the first round when there was a bunch of receivers there you could have grabbed. I mean, they were saying in the draft that this was the most receivers coming out that are really talented. There's a lot of guys that could have went earlier in the rounds and ended up going in the 4th, 5th round, because that's how deep the receivers were in the draft. So the fact that they didn't grab one receiver was very mind-boggling to me. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to kind of see exactly where this offense goes this year under Matt LaFleur's offense. But I don't know. I think that year 2 could be a little different. I think if you have Davante Adams for 16 games, I think you can see Aaron Rodgers stay within that lower tier of the QB1 rankings. But it definitely didn't help when they didn't add any offensive weapons to help him out that can help him out this year. Now, they do have Devin Funchess, they do have MVS and all those other players, but I don't know. I just think that they could have done a lot better job on providing Aaron Rodgers with better receivers around him. That's not Davante Adams. So we'll definitely see, but maybe last year was just a new system and it was a fluke, and Aaron Rodgers obviously is still a Hall of Famer quarterback, but it was just interesting to kind of see the things you're not really accustomed to when it comes to Aaron Rodgers. So hopefully he has a bounce back season, and then we can enjoy seeing Aaron Rodgers of the old. Now, number 9, I have Matt Ryan. Last year he was the QB 11. The Atlanta Falcons always have a high-powered offense. I mean, they were 5th in total offense. They were 3rd in passing offense. Matt Ryan was tied for 8th with 26 passing touchdowns. Now, he has been the QB1 4 out of the last 6 years with multiple top 2 finishes. And so Matt Ryan is in an explosive offense, arguably one of the best tandem receivers in the NFL with Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. And they added an interesting piece with Hayden Hurst, and also the addition of Todd Gurley, who's a great pass-catching running back out of the backfield. If all goes well, I really can see Matt Ryan, close to a top percentage of the top. He could be top two, top. He could be the top quarterback this year. It just all depends on how the offense is clicking with the shorter offseason, not having the mini camps and all that. But Matt Ryan has a lot around him, and that offense is high powered. And you add these guys to the offense. I mean, we can definitely see a great season from Matt Ryan. But I do have him at number 9, just because this is how I rank these guys, and it's just how I see it. But it definitely is going to be. You definitely can see a good season come out from Matt Ryan. Now, my QB8, I have Drew Brees. Last year he ended, obviously, with being a QB 21. He missed 5 games because of his thumb injury. However, he was pretty good post injury. He does have 2 bust games, both against Atlanta, which, well, there are in division games, there's going to be those up and down games that you're playing teams that know you play them the most out of any other team. So it was interesting that both of his bust games came against the Falcons, but he is getting older. I do believe this could be his last season. I do believe that he did agree to terms with NBC to be part of their team on Sunday Night Football. I think that they're just throwing everything in one basket, and they're going to try to get to a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl. And if they do win the Super Bowl, I can see Drew Brees walking away. I think when their offense has always been explosive, I mean, they can beat you in any way. When you have the best receiver in Michael Thomas, you added Emmanuel Sanders, you have Alvin Kamara, you have Murray as another running back. Taysom Hill is always a dynamic quarterback. This team is always a good team, and it will go. I mean, the Saints will be probably the division winners in the NFC South, with possibly being number 1 seed in the playoffs. So Drew Brees, I think he's always been a great quarterback. He's been a QB9 or better the last 10 years. He's as safe as you can get when it comes to quarterback, fantasy quarterbacks. He's going to have a great season. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see exactly how that plays out. But they only got better on offense, and don't be afraid to draft Drew Brees later on in your drafts, and just you can play him all year. I mean, I can't imagine him having a lot of bad games for you in 2020. Now, QB7, I have Josh Allen. Last year, he ended the season at QB6. The Buffalo Bills offense is a more run-heavy offense. So you saw it last year when they ranked 26th in passing offense. I mean, they were below average last year. It's just because they're a run offense first. It's just what it is. I mean, last year, he only had 20 passing touchdowns, which was 21st in the league. But Josh Allen's fantasy value comes from being a dual threat at quarterback. I mean, he threw for over 3,000 yards, which is low for a starting quarterback. However, he added another 510 yards in the rushing game, which ranked 3rd amongst quarterbacks. And he had 9 rushing touchdowns, which was 1st amongst quarterbacks. So he, I see the same from him this year. But I do think adding Stephon Diggs was a bump in his passing yards and touchdowns slightly. I know that Josh Allen does struggle with some accuracy issues, so trying to hit Stephon Diggs deep or whatnot could be an issue, but he's just such a threat at the goal line. Anytime you get in the red zone or near the goal line, he can hand it off to Singletary or whoever else is going to be in the backfield, but he is the guy that you're going to see probably, on average, you're probably going to see around 5 or 6 rushing touchdowns from him, because that's his game. He's a big physical quarterback, and if he's able to find a way to get a little more accurate and he's able to bump up his passing yards and his passing touchdowns, I mean, he definitely can be up there, better than QB6 from last year. I mean, he definitely will continue to be, a good option, and obviously a good streaming option, because he's going to have those games where he's going to break out and have a lot of rushing yards. I mean, that's what's so fun to watch about Josh Allen, is that he can do things both with his legs and his arms. So he does have a safe floor. So his rushing yards allows him to have a safe floor, because he lacks in the passing yards. You'll see him pretty much be a safe floor throughout the season. So don't be afraid of Josh Allen. I think hopefully we see another improvement in his passing and just his overall game in general to kind of get his bump up his fantasy value. So Josh Allen's number 7 for me. Now, number 6, I have him kind of low. I have Deshaun Watson there. Last year, he ended with being the QB4. Their offense is kind of middle of the pack. The Houston offense was 13th overall, and they're 15th in passing offense. He had 26 passing touchdowns. Watson added another 400 yards on the ground with 7 rushing touchdowns. Now, I love watching Deshaun Watson play. He is just so fun to watch. He's electric. My only concern for him this year is the players around him. Now, they did add David Johnson, which is an improvement to the running game, but then they traded away DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, what effect does losing DeAndre Hopkins have on his fantasy upside? We saw his splits last year when Hopkins and Fuller were on the field compared to when they were not, and it was pretty staggering to kind of see how ineffective Deshaun Watson was against passing the ball when it came to not having both of them on the field. So I just don't know exactly who he's going to throw to. He does have some decent talent with Stills. He does have QT. They brought in Randall Cobb, but they just don't have that pure number one receiver that you're hoping that he would have in order to, make up for losing DeAndre Hopkins. Now, Will Fuller, I love Will Fuller. He's a great great receiver when he's on the field, but he just has these injuries that he has to deal with every single season. It's hard to imagine that Will Fuller's going to be there for all 16 games. So hopefully we see something different, but I don't know. I mean, he continues to be. I mean, he does have some really bad games on his record. I mean, he scored single digits twice last year, with one of them coming in your fantasy playoffs. I had him in my fantasy playoffs, and when he was playing the Bucks, I was so frustrated to see Deshaun Watson go against one of the worst passing defenses in the Bucks, and then see him only score, single digits. It was mind-boggling to me on how good he was, generally throughout the season, and how he exploited bad passing defenses. And for him to only have, single digits against them was very frustrating. I mean, obviously, I lost my fantasy championship, so I'm a little bitter. But he does continue to be a solid fantasy option due to his legs, just like Josh Allen. I mean, he's been a top 4 quarterback the last 2 years. So does he finish in the top 4 this year? Probably not. But I think being QB6 is a good spot for Deshaun Watson. Now, QB5, I have Russell Wilson. He was the 3rd fantasy quarterback last year. That's where he finished. Now, the Seahawks offense was 8th overall in total offense. They were 14th in passing offense. Now, Russell Wilson did have 31 passing touchdowns, which was 3rd overall last year. Now, he ran just for under 350 yards, and he only had 3 touchdowns, which is not the norm for Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's usually around 400 to 500 yards with possibly like 5 to 6 rushing touchdowns a year. The concern that I have with him is that even though he's been a solid QB1 his whole career, he's been inconsistent. He was lighting it up last year before the bye week. I mean, and then once the bye week came, it just came all crashing down. After the bye week, he only scored a total of 8 touchdowns. So you see what he was in the first 10 weeks of the season, and he was having great game after great game after great game, and all of a sudden after the bye week, he only had 8. He only had 8 total touchdowns. So he does play in a run-first offense. They really do anything to help him in the offseason, to help with the offensive line. It really is one of the things that most Seattle Seahawks fans are frustrated with, is that the offensive line seems to be just patchwork, and they really don't take high draft picks to get the offensive line figured out. Now, with them being a run-first offense, I mean, that's always been their style. But if he's able to use his legs a little bit more, I think he'll get a bump up in his fantasy value. But I do think that when you add Greg Olsen to the tight end, I think DK Metcalf is going to have a huge season this year. I think he's that prototypical big physical number 1 receiver that he can use in the red zone that will be great for Russell Wilson. And then he has his gadget guy in Tyler Lockett. Hopefully, if Josh Gordon comes back, that could be another option as well. Now, the running back position is going to be a little interesting going forward, because they just signed Carlos Hyde, and then you still have Rashad Penny, you still have Chris Carson, who's coming back from injury. So if they get all these pieces on the field, I think they can have a really good offensive season. But it's going to be interesting to see how Russell Wilson is throughout the season, if he's going to stay consistent. But he continues to be solid. I think he might be a player that you have to look at and do streaming with. You just have to figure out the matchups. But I don't know if I would want to have Russell Wilson as my only quarterback the whole season and play him, because there has been so much inconsistency with him. So just for future reference, it's good to draft him. He's a solid guy, but just know that you may have to pivot if you start seeing those inconsistencies happen. Now, at QB4, I do have Dak Prescott. He was the second overall quarterback last year. The Cowboys' offense was first in total offense. They were second in passing offense. Now, he was fourth in passing touchdowns with 30. I have him at fourth because he hasn't signed yet. So I don't know if that would change either if once he signs his contract. But because he hasn't really been negotiating much with the Cowboys, I mean, there's been a lot of reports that they offered him $35 million a year, and there's other reports saying that was never offered. So you have all this inconsistency of what's going on with actual Dak Prescott. So I think that last year the Cowboys were playing from behind a lot, and because of that, they had to throw the ball all the time. And it's one of those things. I don't know if I really see them playing from behind that much this year. I mean, they do. Their offense is still great. They still have a great offensive line. I mean, you have Gallup, you have Cooper, and then you add CeeDee Lamb to the mix, and you have Zeke. I mean, this offense is potent. I mean, it can be obviously a year in, a year out top one offense, but it's one of those things where if they continue to have leads and sustain those leads and not have to play from behind all the time, I can see Dak Prescott's numbers falling. But their defense is the question mark. So if the defense can't stop anybody, you may see a lot of the same old from last year, where you have to see them coming back from behind, and you see Dak Prescott throwing for a lot of yards and a lot of passing touchdowns because of it. Now, he's obviously a great runner as well, so he does give you that value on the ground with his rushing ability and the rushing touchdowns. But Prescott's a QB1 all day long. They were some games in the season last year where there was some home and away splits where he just wasn't as good on the road than he was at home. So take that for what it's worth. I mean, it's one of those things where it does happen to a lot of players, but when you're thinking of somebody, you're taking a QB so early and hoping for a top 5 finish or a top 3 or 2 finish, you want to have a guy that's going to be consistent throughout the season without having those dips in away games and whatnot. So he definitely can be the number one fantasy quarterback in 2020. It's just a matter of, does he sign? Does he get into the training camp and finally kind of get things going? Because I haven't heard anything from Dak Prescott the whole entire offseason. I haven't seen any videos of him training or anything like that. So I have no idea where he's at. But I'm sure there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we just don't know. But Dak Prescott for now is my third running or my fourth quarterback in my rankings. Now, at number 3, I have Kyler Murray. Now, I could flip-flop Prescott and Murray, but I decided to go with Murray at number 3 only because I think Murray has the potential to be the MVP this year. We've seen it 2 years in a row now that a second-year quarterback went on to win the MVP. Mahomes did it in 18. You had Lamar Jackson do it in 19. I think Murray has the potential to do it in 2020. I love everything that's being set up around Kyler Murray. I mean, they added DeAndre Hopkins. You get a full season with Kenyon Drake. I just think that he's going to have a great sophomore season. I love how accurate he is in the passing game, and I love his running ability. He is a guy who can get out of trouble, make the throws on the run, get yards with his legs. I mean, he is going to be fun to watch. He was fun to watch last year, but I think being in that offense for a second season, I think having better weapons around him, he's going to have a great season. Now, the only concern I have is that he is mobile, but he was sacked 48 times. I mean, that's a lot for a running quarterback. it's interesting to see somebody with so much potential on the ground to be sacked so many times. And that just tells us the offensive line, even how athletic he is, the offensive line was just not very good last year. So I hope they have a way to kind of figure that whole thing out or scheme the offense a little differently so it doesn't put Kyler Murray in a position of getting sacked a lot. But I mean, when he has to pass the ball, he's above average when it comes to passes under 10 yards. And then he's within average or better than average with passes over 20 yards down the seam and down the right sideline. So he can throw the ball deep. If he gets time to throw, he's very accurate. He's very efficient. So I think that it's one of those things where if he gets the time to throw and then they have some running plays for him, I can see a Lamar Jackson type season from Kyler Murray. I mean, I think that is not really a hot take. That's a potential to see what he does this year. I mean, it's gonna be fun to watch, but we'll see. Maybe, right? Now, number 2, I know this is gonna be controversial, but I have Lamar Jackson number 2. I know he finished number 1 last year. I know he was the MVP last year. I know he's coming from he's in a good offense with the Baltimore Ravens, and he led the league in passing touchdowns. He's a beast, no question. He had a historic season last year for rushing for 1,200 yards. Then he added 7 rushing touchdowns. But history tells us that type of season won't happen again. I don't think he's going to run as much this year. I think they're going to find a way to get the offense to cater around more of his passing ability because he was a lot better as a passer last year. And I am afraid that there's going to be a lot more schemes for Lamar Jackson to make sure he doesn't run and have that ability to run so much. I think that we'll see what people try to do against Michael Vick. I know it didn't work out a lot, but I know when Michael Vick was playing for the Falcons and I was going to the Bucs games, they always had Derek Brooks spying Michael Vick. And it worked. It did help. In the games that we played the Falcons, he didn't really blow us up for a lot of yardage. And I think you're going to start seeing schemes like that where you're going to see what's going to happen with how they're going to defend Lamar Jackson. But you know that he's not going to, you're not going to stop him. I mean, the guy is just a monster. And I think that he's going to have another great fantasy season. Hopefully, even if he dials back down his rushing yards and all that, you're still going to see that safe floor with him. You're not going to see a guy that's going to almost all of a sudden be a bust because he's too talented. I mean, this is a great player. So for right now, I do have Lamar Jackson number 2. So hopefully you guys agree with that. Now, number 1, I have Patrick Mahomes. I don't think there's a lot to argue with this pick. I think that when you look at Patrick Mahomes, he did end last year at QB7. He missed 2 games because of his knee injury. And even so, he still was the QB7. So I think with another 16-game season, you're going to see numbers from his MVP season. I think Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback that could be year in and year out the number 1 fantasy quarterback because there's so much talent around him. I mean, they're able to score at any time, anywhere on the field. You just have so many people around him. And then you add Clyde Edwards-Helaire to the running back position. I mean, it's almost like playing Madden. It's unfair to see how much Mahomes has around him to be able to sustain greatness in fantasy football. And until otherwise, it's hard to argue that Patrick Mahomes is not going to be the number 1 quarterback this year or in drafts. I know for me, I will be taking Patrick Mahomes over Lamar Jackson because I think his style of game is the type that's going to be sustainable. You're going to be able to see high yardage, high passing touchdowns, and then he can still run the ball. So it's not like he's not mobile. So he can add you a few touchdowns on the ground. So Patrick Mahomes to me by far is my QB1 on the season. So there you go. So those are my top 12 quarterbacks for this season. As a review, we have Carson Wentz at 12. We have Tom Brady at 11. We have Aaron Rodgers at 10. Matt Ryan at 9. Drew Brees at number 8. Josh Allen at 7. Deshaun Watson at 6. Russell Wilson at 5, Dak Prescott at 4, Kyler Murray at 3, Lamar Jackson at 2, and then you have Patrick Mahomes as my number 1 ranked quarterback for this season. So that's it. Those are my top 12 quarterback rankings for 2020. I really appreciate you listening today, and let me know if you found value from this episode and leave a comment. Next episode, I'll be talking about my top 12 running backs for 2020. So don't forget to hit subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss that episode. Now, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at the Gridiron Pod, and you can find us on Instagram at Gridiron Fantasy Football. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Take care.